In 2004, a Marine corporal named Jason Dunham was on patrol with his unit in Iraq. They came under attack. Corporal Dunham threw himself on an enemy grenade to save his fellow Marines. He was killed. The rest of his platoon was saved because of his actions. And in 2007, Jason Dunham became only the second U.S. service member and the first U.S. Marine awarded the Medal of Honor, in his case posthumously, for the Iraq War. 2 months later, in March 2007, the U.S. Navy announced that a new guided missile destroyer would be named the USS Jason Dunham. This is that ship. It was christened by Jason Dunham's mother in 2009. It is in service now, and it likely will be for a very long time to come. USS Jason Dunham has that very meaningful name for a very meaningful reason. But it's known in the Navy as DDG 109. You can see the 109 there on the hull. All Navy ships have unique identifying numbers like that. This, for example, is the aircraft carrier, the George H.W. Bush. I've always liked this photo of former President Bush, seeing them lower the top part of that aircraft carrier down onto the deck. You see the gigantic 77 in lights coming down from above him. The USS George H.W. Bush is the CVN 77 in the Navy. The 77 is several stories tall on the aircraft carrier, as you can see it there from the deck. Also, if you look in the lower right-hand corner of this picture, you can see that there's also a giant 77 painted right on the flight deck. The Navy does this for all their ships. Here's the USS Albany being commissioned as an attack submarine. And again, you see the unique identifying numbers on it there, the SSN 753 in this case. Navy started assigning unique numbers to its ships in the 1800s. Every one of them still gets a name, oftentimes a moving and meaningful name. But the idea was to simplify and shorten the unique identifiers for ships at sea to minimize confusion. The letters before the numbers signify what kind of ship the ship is, and then the number follows. For the class of ship that's called a cruiser, for example, the modern type of cruiser is called a guided missile cruiser. All the ships in that class have unique identifying numbers that start with CG. Before we had guided missile cruisers, though, we had armored cruisers or heavy cruisers, and their unique numbers started with CA, armored cruisers. They're a crucial part of the Navy's fleet in World War II. And in 1945, one of these armored cruisers, the CA-35, you can see it here, steaming at sea, it got orders to make its way to an island in the Marianas, tucked between the Philippine Sea and the Pacific Ocean. They were due to make a very important delivery, but one that was so secret, the captain and his crew did not know what they were delivering. Unbeknownst to the captain and his crew, what they had on board were parts and enriched uranium for the atomic bomb that would later be dropped on Hiroshima. Again, the captain and the crew of the CA-35 didn't know what they were delivering. It was a top secret mission. Their cargo was secret, the route was secret, the existence of the whole mission was secret. So not many people actually knew where the CA-35 was going or where it was on any particular day because of the secrecy of its mission. It arrived in the Marianas July 26, 1945. They unloaded their secret cargo, and then they turned around and started to make their way to the Philippines. The cruiser had 1,200 men on board, and a Japanese sub found them and hit the ship with 2 torpedoes. Instantly crippled the ship, instantly knocked out the ship's communications. The order to abandon ship couldn't even be announced in an amplified way. It was spread by word of mouth. They had almost no time. That cruiser with 1,200 American sailors and Marines on board sank in 12 minutes. And of the 1,200 men on board, 400 of them died in the initial attack. That left about 800 men who ended up in the water, with only about a dozen small rafts between them. Very dire circumstances. Drinking water, exhaustion, exposure, shark attacks. The men who survived floated out there for 5 days with nothing. And no one came to rescue them because when the CA-35 went down, nobody had any idea that it had sunk. There were no communications from the ship. They'd been on a secret mission where nobody knew where they were or where they were supposed to be when. It was only almost 5 days later when a bomber pilot happened to spot an oil slick in the water. He buzzed lower to investigate. He called in the rescue. By the time the rescue came, only 316 men were left alive out of the 1,200 who'd been on board that ship and out of the 800 who went into the water. It was the Navy's worst disaster at sea. And now with 72 years gone by since then, of the 316 survivors that day, only 19 of them are still with us. A wreckage of the CA-35 was never found until this week. Finally. The proof they finally found it after all these years was when they saw the number on the hull. Yep, they saw that 35. That's it. This is the USS Indianapolis, the CA-35, more than 3 miles down in the Philippine Sea. And it's recognizable. You can see a gun barrel. There's apparently a spare float in this next image from one of the planes that was on board. There's a dual 40-millimeter aircraft gun with shells still loaded into the gun. The way they found this was with a research vessel owned by zillionaire Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft. And, you know, it's an astonishing adventure at sea to find something like this 3 miles down, far from where anybody thought it was more than 70 years later. But what a solemn thing, given the number of men who died on board and given what their last mission was before they were hit. And this news this week comes at an emotional time anyway for the U.S. Navy. Today, the Navy suspended the search at sea for the sailors missing from the USS John McCain. They're no longer treating that mission as a rescue mission. Instead, it is a recovery mission to try to find those sailors' remains. Today, the Navy released the names of one sailor whose body was recovered and the 9 others who are still missing. They've also removed the commander of the 7th Fleet, incidentally, relieved him from duty. Meanwhile, though, in the Philippine Sea, the CA-35, the USS Indianapolis, is found all these years later. And it's interesting, the ship's exact location remains classified. They're continuing to survey the site, but there are no plans to excavate it or to disturb what's there. It's being treated as a war grave, as a final resting place. But now it is one that has finally been found.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.